Today for math, we're going to be working on chapter 4 and section 7, which is all on the distributive property of multiplication. So we learned earlier about some of those properties of multiplication, and earlier in chapter 2, we learned about the distributive property of addition. This one is very similar, just now we're working with multiplication. And what it says is that we can multiply numbers by decomposing them or breaking them down into parts, and then if we add those products together, we'll end up with the same answer as if we multiplied the whole together. Now, that's a very confusing definition, so what we're going to do is we're going to work through some examples just to kind of see what we have here. Okay, so our first one says that Chef Cora hard boils 6 dozen eggs each day to make egg salad for sandwiches at the food court. How many eggs does she hard boil each day? Now, our problem here is 6 times 12. Okay, 6 times 12, not really a fact that we practice all that much. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of decompose this and we're going to break this number down. So one way we can break this number down is by using our expanded form and breaking it down that way. So that's what we're going to do today, is we're going to break it down by that expanded form. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn 6 times 12 into 2 separate multiplication problems that we will then add up. So we're going to keep 6 the same. We're not going to change that number at all. Our 6 is going to stay the same. And the reason we're keeping that 6 the same is our 6 is a more manageable number. It's one that we're used to multiplying. And now what we're going to do is we're going to break down our 12. 12 is the more difficult number. It's not something we work with as much. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 12. We're going to break it into 2 parts. So we're going to break that into a 10 and into a 2. Okay? Just like we would if we broke 12 into our expanded form here, it would equal 12 is 10 plus 2. And again, that all comes back to that place value of breaking it down into our tens place and into our ones place. So that's what we broke it down into here, our ones place and our tens place. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my multiplication for this. So what I will go about doing is I'll do 6 times 10. 6 times 10 is a fact that we all have worked on. We know our tens. I can figure that out multiple ways. I like to use my multiplication helper. So I'm going to do 6 times 10. I know that that equals 60. Okay, that's my first step. And these arrows really help me to see that's where the answer is going. We're just kind of shrinking it down. My next step is I'm going to then do 6 times 2. 6 times 2 is a fact I've been practicing a lot with extra math, so I know that. 6 times 2 is actually 12. And now that I've done my first step, I decompose the numbers. Then I did my multiplication. Now I just need to add them together to get my total product. So I have 60 plus 12. I know that that would be 72. And because of my distributive property, I know that even though I did 2 separate problems here of 6 times 10 and 6 times 2, this 72 I got after adding those products is going to be the same as if I just did 6 times 12 in the first place. So in this case, that Chef Cora would have boiled 72 eggs each day. Take a look at our second example. I just want to go over our distributive property again, and this is this key term here at the top of the page. And it simply tells us that when we multiply the add-ins of a number, then we add the products, okay? And again, that's a very fancy way of saying that if we decompose a number and multiply it, just like we did for 6 times 12, as long as we add the products back together, we will end up with the same answer as our original problem. So let's take a look at number 2 now. It says 27 students are attending a performance at a children's theater. Each admission ticket is $5. What is the total cost of the 27 students? Okay, so now what I need to figure out is, first, it sets up a nice equation for me. Okay, I need to figure out the cost. I want to know what these tickets are going to cost. So the first thing I need to do is let C represent my cost. I know that C times something equals 5. Well, 5 is how much each ticket costs. Now I need to know how many tickets are being bought. Since there are 27 students, there would be 27 tickets bought, so we'll fill in 27 for our equation. Now this is where I decompose the number, and this example has to have done that for us already. But when I'm decomposing the number, remember I'm breaking it down by place value. So if I have 27 here, 27 can be broken down into its tens place, which would be a 2. A 2 in the tens place equals 20. Plus, oh, there we go. Plus its ones place, and there's a 7 in the ones, which makes it a 7. So that's what we're decomposing it into, and that's what we're going to use our distributive property on, is after we've decomposed it, now we get to multiply it by each of these numbers. So now I'm going to take them and do my multiplication. So I have 5 times 20. Okay, that's something we practiced before. That was what we worked on last week with that multiplication by place value. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 20 times 5. I like to cover this 0 up and do 20 times, or do 2 times 5 and get 10. And then I simply need to just add that 0 back that I covered up so it keeps it balanced. Okay, so 20 times 5 is 100. Plus 7 times 5. 7 times 5 is a fact that I practice a lot, and I know that that is 35. Okay. Now I need to just add them together. I have 100 plus 35. I know my answer will be 135. Bringing that back to my equation, 27 times 5, because of my distributive property, tells me that is 135. If I look back at my original equation here, where C represents the cost, C equals 27 times 5. 27 times 5 equals 135. So that means C equals 135. So the total cost of the 27 students, I'm going to label my unit here so I always know what I'm talking about, will be $135. Go ahead and switched over to my whiteboard so I could work through a couple more of these problems with you. Again, all focused on the distributive property. So now I have my problem written out here, and again, this is that standard form I'm going to see most of my problems in. So I have 42 times 3. Okay? One other way we can solve these is through what's called an area model. All right, an area model is where we're going to find kind of a rectangle to figure out and help us break these down. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to first draw my rectangle here. All right, so I'm going to make a nice rectangle here. Okay, and this will serve as my area model. All right, now my area model is still going to be really using that place value, my expanded form, where I'm breaking it down that way. So the first thing I notice is that my 3 is going to stay the same. That's my simple number. That's not what I'm going to change because I don't need to. I can keep that the same. I've practiced 3s. That's easy for me to do. This is where I need to do my breakdown now. So I'm going to take 42 and I'm going to put it in expanded form. So I'm going to take 42 is going to equal, I'm going to break down by the place value again. So I know I have 2 place values. I have my 10s and I have my 1s. Okay, so I like to start with my 10s. I have my 10s. There is a 4 in the 10s place. What that tells me is that is 4 10s. So 10, 20, 30, 40. So 4 in the 10s equals 40. Okay, now I'm going to add that to my 2. My 2 is in the 1s place, so 1, 2, counting by 1s, and I get a 2. So when I break this down, it breaks into 40 and 2. Now this is where my area model comes in because my area model tells us that I'm going to be making 2 separate shapes. Okay, so I'm going to break this down, and I like to try to keep it pretty close where I know one shape is going to be a lot bigger than the other because 40 is a lot bigger than 2. Okay, so what this tells me is that this shape is going to be 3 by 40. Okay, that would be this area, and that's my whole shape there. On the other hand, my other one is going to be a lot smaller. So this will stay a 3. You can see this height is the same as this height all the way across, so it stays a 3. But now this one is only 2 wide, so that is a lot smaller. All right. Now this is where I can do my multiplication, really set up that area model. So I'll write it right in the middle here for us. I have now for this problem is going to be 3 times 40. I know from my last week's work that this is actually 3 times 4, which is a problem I know is 12. And then I need to remember that this is not 4, but 4 10s. So this is not 12, but 12 10s. So I'm adding that 0 to the end. Over here, I have a little bit of a simpler problem where it's just 3 times 2. And I know my 3 times 2 is going to be 6. Now I have my 2 totals or my areas for each of these rectangles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just add those together. So I have 120 plus 6, and again, those would be my 2 totals there, equals 126, and that would be my answer for this problem. The final example for us today is going to be 37 times 4. Okay, so again, all using my distributive property, I always am going to start by finding the number that I would like to break down. In this case, it makes it pretty simple. I know 4 facts. I don't know 37 facts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose to break down this 37. Okay, so again, I'm going to go by my place value, and this is going to become 2 separate numbers here. So my new problem is going to be, and we'll have these parentheses below, 4, because that's staying the same, times something plus, that's a very important part of the distributive property, is that we're adding these two products together, plus 4, again, stays the same, times something else. Okay, and that will get me my answer. Now, I need to find what goes in those blanks. To find what goes in those blanks, I'm going to break this number down. When I break this number down again, we keep coming back to that expanded form. What I need to do is just split it up by its place value. So I know that I have a 3 and a 7. Now I need to know what each of those actually means. So this 3 is in my tens place. A 3 in the tens place, I know that the value of that is 30. So I'm going to split this down. And again, with my expanded form, I'm taking 37 and I'm breaking it into first my tens of 30 plus in my ones I have a 7, so it would just be 7. This is my expanded form. These are the numbers I'm going to use up here. So now I will plug in 30 and I will plug in 7. From here, I can do my multiplication. These are more workable problems and these are things I've done before. This first one looks challenging, but because I know how place value works, I know how to multiply by it, I can get it done very simply. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my root problem or my base one, which would be 4 times just 3. 4 times 3, I know, is 12. Then I need to remember that that 0 was up here because this is not 3, it's 3 tens. So this is not 12, it's 12 tens. So I'm matching that 0. So we have 1 on each one. Now I'm going to add that to my total from over here, and this one is just a straightforward problem. I know it's on my multiplication helper sheet if I need it. I've been practicing it in extra math, and hopefully I've been practicing it at home with my family as well. But I can just do 4 times 7, and I know that that's going to be 28. Now, this one's a little bit trickier. I don't know if I can do this straight in my head, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite this. I'm going to write 120 plus 28. This way it's a little easier to work through that addition. And for this, again, I'm going to start with my ones place. 0 plus 1 I know is 8. 2 plus 2, I get 4. And there is nothing below or above this 1, so it will stay the same. So now I know that 148 is what I add these together to be. Okay? These came from here, so this would stay 148. And because of my distributive property, I now know that 37 times 4 is 148. Take your time, work through all of the problems carefully on your assignment today. Make sure that you do all parts and follow all directions in your assignment. If you have any questions, be sure to, the video is always here to rewatch. If you still have questions, be sure to log on to your teacher's office hours.